Hello, friends, and welcome to Worldbuild with us, the podcast where we create fantastical worlds with help from you, our listeners. My name is Rob Hilford, and I'm here with my co-hosts Daniel Quinn and Courtney Staples. On today's episode, we have a new prompt from a new listener, and we're going to be getting right into that right after the shilling portion, where I tell you, hey, do you want us to build your world? And then we shill right before we do that. Well, guess what? You can go to our website, worldbuildwithus.com, where you can click the link, follow the instructions, and within a reasonable amount of time, we'll be building your world. Do you hate the audio podcast aspect of the podcast? Well, guess what? You can go on to YouTube and go ahead and subscribe and do all the YouTube stuff on there if you really would prefer to listen to it that way. Just, if you want to get in on that before it explodes and gets all over the place, you can go ahead and do that now. And if you want to follow us on social media, we're on Twitter at Let's Worldbuild. And if you're more willing to talk to us more directly, you can go on to our Discord with a link for that in the description. And of course, if you're feeling particularly generous or you just want 2 episodes for your prompts, you can always go to our Patreon, give us money as a thank you, and do that whenever you want. Anyway, all that shilling is out of the way. Just ripped through it today.
A rapid fire, yeah.
Yeah. Bam, 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 bam. Done. And we're getting right into the prompt because the prompt is pretty fun. And it's from a new listener, Overlord Zero, who says, in this world, there exists a school that is governed by the god of knowledge. The school is a tower with 6 layers, and each country will send their representatives to become students in this school. Those who graduated from the school are given the right to lead their country. So there are 3 tenets with this particular prompt. Number 1, gifted students are given power based on the subject they excel in. Number 2, all the teachers are not human and represent different aspects of knowledge or subjects. And number 3, all knowledge in this world contains a different level of hazard capable of affecting the mind. The more complex the knowledge is, the more hazardous it can be, and different individuals will have different resistances to this effect. So Overlord Zero, thank you very much for your new prompt. And this is a fun one. I'm actually very excited to see how quickly we can turn this into a bloodbath. So Courtney, why don't you start us off today and tell us where you want to get us started?
Okay. Not blood, I swear. My first tenet is that the god of knowledge was actually imprisoned or captured here long ago. So the rest of the world is in a sort of dark age because so much information has been lost out there.
Oh, that's super fun.
That is really neat. I like that.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
That sets the stage for the rest of the world really easily.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. That is also like kind of a terrifying thing because it's like, I assumed that, oh, this is just one school. It's like, nah, you're saying that there's like basically a singular school.
It's the only school.
Yeah. I did take in the prompt, it says there exists only one school that is governed by the god of knowledge. So I took that very literally as literally this is the school.
Oh, there is. Oh, so you're okay. Yeah. When I read that, I'm like, there's only one school ran by the god of knowledge.
Yeah.
The way that I interpreted that, but I like your interpretation a lot as well. And I like the interpretation that it's like, hey, we imprisoned the god. Well, okay, so who actually imprisoned the god of knowledge here? Do we know that yet? Or do we want to save that for other round tenets?
Yeah, I'm not sure. So I'm down to figure it out as we go.
Excellent. All right. Daniel, what do you got for us with your first tenet then?
There exists a discipline of forbidden knowledge that's sealed off from study that was possessed ages ago by a country that was destroyed for having possessed the knowledge.
Is it how to imprison the god of knowledge? Because I feel like that's a pretty good forbidden knowledge to have.
My thought was, because obviously I imagine some of this will focus on the individuals who have to study there and what goes on there. So my thinking is this is a discipline that's like, just like they said, there's 6 layers or whatever. I imagine this is like a 7th layer, that's forbidden.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. So it's like the divine or something, or the diabolic, maybe one or the other.
Yeah. And I mean, also I'm imagining too, our listener says that the students are sent here to rule over their country, right, in the end. So I'm imagining a country that had this knowledge at one point, but it, everyone knows now it's just destroyed. Like it's a ruin.
Gotcha. Well, I'm going to take that segue to lead into my first tenet. I'm so glad that you mentioned the right to rule their country, because my first tenet is, though the students have the right to rule their country, the incredibly low graduation rate and something about the schooling itself makes the graduates unwilling to rule.
After they come out?
Yes. The graduates, right? Like, one, graduation rate is going to be low. That's my guess anyway. And then the thing is, something happens to them once they're in there. They're like, I don't want to rule. And I was thinking that this could be a number of reasons, and you could even make it like personalized each time. But I thought it would just be a fun and interesting way that, these countries are desperately sending people to find a ruler, to find a king, and all of them come out like, just like, I'm good. I don't really want to. Something about that to me is kind of like a little twisted and fun.
Is it a high likelihood, or is it every single one?
Oh, every single one. Yeah.
So then the only race question I would have then is like, there would never be rulers?
Well, see, my kind of interpretation of the reaction to that is, there is just like committees and meritocracies and like oligarchies and stuff like that exist, that are like councils that you can have like little corrupt things, like, because my guess, right, like my interpretation is, they're looking for the ideal philosopher king, like that Socrates and Plato and stuff talked about, right?
So they're looking for a very, like, not just like for regular administration of their countries, like appointing a president. They're looking for kind of like a divine leader that will take them to the next step, in a sense.
Exactly.
Got you. Okay, so this is the perfect leader.
Yeah, it's not like it's anarchy without them. Yeah,
I see. That's what I was wondering. So I'm picturing, based on what you're saying, like, if we're the USA, right, and we keep electing presidents that are going to be in jail, we're sending our best and brightest, right, to find the ultimate president, basically, who could lead us.
Daniel, are they sending their best? I don't think they're sending their best, Daniel.
Oh, right. Okay, so that's kind of cool.
Yeah, no, I like that, and I wonder if it's something about the knowledge itself. Like, I'm thinking maybe this god of knowledge is also kind of a trickster god, and or it does something to like knowingly give these people knowledge that will keep them from wanting to go back and rule, like whether it's something to tempt them to keep them at the school forever, or some sort of knowledge that just like wipes away their desire to lead. Or
see, I'm not even necessarily thinking that trickery has to be involved. Like, this is a spiteful knowledge god. It's like, oh, you're going to keep me locked up in here? Sure, no problem. I'm just going to make sure that every person you keep sending me is going to be so tired of ruling once they're done, they're just not going to want to do it. Like that's kind of what I'm assuming is going on here as well. Maybe a little bit with the spitefulness,
I mean, there's a metaphorical implication to this, in that, like, I can imagine, they often say the person best fit to rule is the one who doesn't want to rule, the one who doesn't seek power.
Yes.
So I wonder if, like, which is kind of to what you both are saying, that possessing that certain knowledge makes you more enlightened, and you realize there's more for you to do besides rule a people, right? Or something more important to do, because there's different kinds of knowledge it suggests. So perhaps, like, you go there and you're in the school of the fifth layer, and it has to do with, I don't know, like charity or something. And, like, you had hoped to go to learn about social systems to better rule your country. That was the lure. But in learning about charity, you realize that you would rather be on the streets with the poor, feeding them, than ruling over them. And so now the knowledge has corrupted you, but it's not so much that the god has done this. I mean, maybe the god is spiteful and has done this to give you that revelation, but the end result is actually what was the school intended. You know what I mean? Like, that enlightenment means the abandonment of power, which I think is just a really cool twist that it has. But then it's like, to create the rightful leader, that's 1 in a million, because they have to also still want to lead as a result of the knowledge.
It's like they'd want to like willingly take on this sacrifice of sorts of like, they know that this is needed of them, even though they don't want to do it at all. That's
yeah, that's cool.
You know what I just realized as well? I didn't mean this when I originally came up with this, but I suggested that, those who graduate are unlikely and unwilling to rule, but who's to say that you die or you can't just like leave the school whenever you want? So I'm now thinking that the people who are actually leading these countries are people who dropped out or, have some claim to fame where it's like, oh, I came in second, or I left the school because I knew that my true place to rule was back at home. Like, because going to this knowledge school, right, is like a massive honor in and of itself, and having some kind of clout is attached to it, right? Like, oh, I'm obviously better to rule because I was a leader and I went to this school in the first place.
It's like Ivy Leagues.
It's almost like it strips them of their ego in a way.
Or it inflates their ego.
Yeah, I'm glad that we're on the same page, Daniel. Although, Courtney, I like that concept as well.
Like, it could do both, yeah.
Or I meant like the schooling process, which is interesting because when I was brainstorming tenets, like, and Daniel, you mentioned, I think, like enlightenment of sorts. I had thought of doing something with like each layer of the school is related to some sort of chakra, which I don't really know.
I like that.
I don't really know anything about them, so I didn't want to like force that into a tenet, doing like 10 minutes of research on it. But I wonder if like there's something there that we can go towards.
Yeah, there absolutely is, because I did actually in research for a game with you guys, I based 7 realms of a fantastical world on the 7 chakra. So yeah, I can actually pull that up. Although let's put a pin in that for the time being, because I think that's something that we can talk about a little bit later.
When you're talking about the stripping of egos, like, I can see how that would work in both directions, because on the one hand, their ego is inflated when they come back because they're like, oh, like, I can spin this for having a better station in the administration, right? But when they go there, the ego they came in with was technically crushed because they realized they're not good enough to do this, right? So it's almost like hiding your crushed ego, but then like coming back and capitalizing on it because your ego is crushed,
Yeah,
I'm definitely creating like these NPCs who are like bitter, and they blamed the administration, they blamed the other people
for not preparing them,
for not preparing them, or like, oh, well, this was an impossible task, no one could do this, like, oh, well, I had to cheat because how else could anyone actually do it legit? All these reasons that, like, keep them in a small world, that's what they're creating for themselves by rejecting this idea. So yeah, that's actually pretty exciting. I'm a big fan of this so far.
What's the likelihood? I mean, so okay, I imagine a leader comes about once in some period, but like, what is the cycle? What's the period there of receiving actual leaders?
Do we need to put a timeline on it? Because I think that we can like just live this out. And like, I think at this point, the rulers of the world are doing this strictly out of ritual at this point. There's no genuine expectation that a god king will come from the god of knowledge, right?
Well, that's what I'm asking, right? Like, because if it is, once every 100 years, then they know the process actually works, and that changes how we perceive things, right? If it's never happened, then it's like a legendary thing that's somewhat religious almost, right? But I want to know because the credulity of the system, of the way that people think of the system, depends on how frequently it actually yields leaders.
Yeah, it's sort of interesting because when I was reading through the prompt, I had imagined that it was going to be a frequent turnover of leadership, and that would almost be like more, not democratic, but more fair in terms of you're bringing in new ideas, new knowledge every like few years. But this certainly changes that view of it.
Well, that can still be true. It's just they wouldn't be graduates that are doing it. The leaders that come from this temple of knowledge, this school of knowledge, they're just people who are like, I dropped out. My place is elsewhere. Like maybe the rigor of the study is too much, but they still bring back the knowledge that they gained and better their countries that way.
I mean, I don't know. I don't know if I agree with that all the way, though. Like, I'm sure they come back with some knowledge, right? Obviously, because they studied to some degree, but only because the way the prompt seems to structure things is that, graduation seems to give them the gift of the right to lead their country. So I don't know if that's knowledge or if it's the permission to be the true leader. You know what I mean? Like, so it makes me wonder, like, if the leaders never come, or they only come, once in 1,000 years, then there's no true rightful leader of their country. I'm trying to tease out, like, what is the difference between, if the countries can really move along and function with failed graduates, that makes the group they send there less important, and sort of the return knowledge kind of watered down. So that's why I want to know, like, when I do get a true and rightful leader, like, what does that mean for the country, and how frequently do they need that?
So that's actually what I was going to get into, because we can do something that we rarely ever do. And I'm thinking about it. I'm not sure that we've ever done it, but this could actually be a case where prophecy is actually a really good motivator, or a really good institution that keeps people engaged within this system. You know, you have to keep sending, potential graduates, because there is a prophecy that under these conditions, the true leader will arise, but those conditions just haven't been met yet. And the only way that you can test those conditions is through, the crucible of academia, of sending people to the temple continuously. Does that make sense?
So are you saying you're interested in it being really never having happened before? So it's about prophecy.
I think that's really fun to me, because like we're in the middle of this story as humanity is, one, as Courtney kind of suggested with her tenet, is getting increasingly dark, right? And I mean that in like an enlightenment sense, right? Where knowledge is becoming scarcer, and people are becoming more desperate to allow the illumination of the world, to allow knowledge to expand and grow. And so all they can do is have faith in a prophecy that may or may not come true, that will one day, elicit the true, like leader, or the true philosopher king, or something like that.
I mean, I'm more inclined to have I want to be able to explore to what does it mean when the leader comes back, right? So like even if it was once in a generation or once every 100 years that they successfully yield a leader, for one of the countries, I think what that will do is now that country actually has station in a way the other countries don't. And so what do the dynamics look like when they have a valid leader? I could see perhaps the story centering around the return of a leader who chooses to lead, and people going into the thing to study in hopes of getting their own leader. But now one of these countries has a leader, and that's a big deal.
Yeah, I do like that. And I do think it makes sense as far as like, why would people keep doing this year after year, generation after generation? Like there has to be some glimmer of hope involved in getting a leader out of this. So like maybe it is a once in a century thing that somebody comes along who is actually willing to lead.
Gotcha. Okay.
Like not guaranteed, but that seems to be the cadence of it. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, I mean, yeah, I'm willing to keep my mind open. I think that we still have another round of tenets that we can go through. Yeah, let's go ahead. Courtney, start us off with your second tenet. What do you got for us?
Responding to the tenet that all the teachers are not human, I'm going to say that at least some of the teachers, if not all of them, are mundane animals.
Oh, okay. So we're talking about like an Avatar: The Last Airbender, like they learned their forms from like badger moles and stuff like that?
They're mundane as in like just a raccoon or like a badger. So like not like mythical or monstrous, but just like little woodland animals.
I could see the university as having almost like a treehouse composition to it then, which would be kind of cute,
But yeah, that is cute.
Okay, but hold on. How is this animal? Are you suggesting that like that's the form that it takes, or are you saying that like it is just an animal?
Like an animal that's been like it obviously has some sort of sentient knowledge or like ways of communicating, but appearance wise, it is like
magically appears. Yeah, there's an animal.
No, that's fine. I was just imagining like I've been learning for 15 years from this raccoon, and like one of the other administrators like, that's just a raccoon. You're like, oh no, 15 years wasted.
You're so good at picking through trash now.
yeah, exactly. It's like I've learned every movement from this raccoon, my master. Yeah, no, I like that. That's fun.
I could see the animals thematically aligning with what they're teaching. Like if you're teaching let's say one of the floors is like the school of, I don't know, statecraft, and the teacher's a cat because it involves like subterfuge. That would be kind of cute.
Yeah. I like that. Because it does say like they represent different knowledge or subjects. So it does make sense that they would like tie in with what the animal is associated with.
And there's like historical precedent for, like kung fu forms being learned from different animals and stuff like that. So, I mean, you could extrapolate that to a fantastical sense as well. And I think that could work out pretty well.
It also
Yeah.
raises the question of what sort of creature is the god of knowledge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was wondering as we were chatting just now, like, is this something where the god of knowledge was imprisoned here, then he got kind of bored and lonely, so he just like started giving consciousness to
Oh,
animals in the vicinity,
in
and
this tree.
like they
Oh,
became like his cohort, or his like they
Mm.
became his professors over time.
like he gave them each a bit of genius, almost.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh, especially as like a fuck you to the people who imprisoned him there,
Uh
right? Like,
huh.
oh,
Yeah.
you're going to imprison me here? Well, guess what? I'm going to impart massive knowledge to people who aren't humans. How do you feel
yeah,
about
Mhm.
that? You know?
yeah.
Yeah.
Congrats, this mouse is now a genius who can defeat you in chess and stuff.
I'm trying to think of the mythical history here. It seems some enemy of knowledge, right, imprisoned the god of knowledge, and
Mm,
then it seems after that the world lost the ability to learn certain things because they're in
mhm,
this tree.
Mhm.
And we've established that this god has either a kind of a spitefulness or a trickeriness to him, obviously because he's imprisoned, and that he's given a bit of genius of himself, a bit of that knowledge back to these creatures to let it be teased out to people. So I wonder, like, it seems like knowledge metaphorically means like the ability to have a certain amount of autonomy, right? Because these countries don't have leaders who suggest their autonomy. It makes me wonder then, like, the bit of knowledge that's been lost or made forbidden, is that like the thing that would break the situation for them? Because with the god being imprisoned, it seems like we're talking a little bit about like, I don't know, agency in some way is what's being
mm,
stripped from the world.
Oh, so you're saying that like the country that was obliterated, they like
Mhm.
reigned over the concept of agency or something like
Maybe
that?
or something like that. Because it seems like
Yeah.
these are falling into place. Is what I'm suggesting. All of our ideas, you know.
Yeah.
mm. Yeah, I mean, what I'm thinking about when I'm thinking about a dark age is a restriction of a flow of knowledge, right? Or
Yeah.
the
Mhm.
stagnancy of knowledge due to, extenuating circumstances and
hmm
whatnot.
I guess what in summary, I'm thinking like there is a bit of knowledge that is being withheld, even if you go to the
Mhm.
school from the society
Mhm.
Oh,
as a whole. You know what I mean?
yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
that has something to do with its imprisonment and something to do with the destroyed country.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think I can see what you're trying to say, Daniel.
hmm
Because forgive me if I'm wrong. Are you suggesting that there is a definitive lack of something without knowledge?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay,
So there's something that no one can kind of get, I think.
right,
None of the countries can. That's being
right.
withheld.
Maybe it's like ambition even. Like you
Oh.
go to the school,
Yeah.
you experience like ego death basically, but then like after that, you have no way of like realizing, what you want anymore, or
Mm.
like you focusing on kind of this ultimate goal that you had gone there with or something like that.
Mhm.
Thematically, what we can also do is, like, why is everyone so slavishly devote to tradition? Why is everyone so slavishly devote to things that are already in, like that are stagnant, that won't move us forward, won't progress?
Mhm.
And like, it's a lack of motivation to do so, right? It is a lack of progress, in other words, right? And I think that's kind of what we're getting at here a little bit. And I think that's kind of
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah. So Daniel, hit us with your second tenet. What do you got for us, sir?
It's very brief. It simply says the passage of time is different inside the tower than outside.
Oh, of course. You
Mm.
got like 1,000 years passes, within the span. That's cool.
Or, I mean, the inverse I thought might be kind of fun. Oh, that's true. Yeah. I guess, and it could be that I could see like you going there and it might be like for your study, right?
Mhm.
And like you're saying, a lot of time passes outside, so they can come back as young as they were, even
Right.
though they may have
Yeah.
studied a lifetime, or vice
Yeah.
Mhm.
versa.
Yeah.
That's kind of interesting. You're put into a level of stasis almost, right?
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
what that could also represent is like a kind of stagnancy with time as well in
hmm
some cases, right?
Like I'm thinking like the not in the sciencey sense of like making all that balance out, but like perhaps you're there and you've actually studied for 30 years. You feel like you've been there for 30 years studying. You still remain
Mm,
whatever age you are, because quote unquote in this case a magical sense of time doesn't pass. And
mhm.
then when they return, maybe it was like 100 years, or maybe it was like 10 minutes. And so
Mhm.
you're suddenly
Right.
changed. I don't know. I think there'd be a need to have some kind of differential.
That actually
Yeah.
sounds really fun because now I'm just thinking of like a person who never even entered the temple, but they know enough that like time
Yeah.
dilation exists. Like, I came out a genius, and like they kind of like have to con their way through
That would be
life after
funny.
that.
The bumbling failed charlatan.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
really fun. Yeah.
I think that also works well with this like lack of ambition or like kind of shifting in goals once these people leave the school. Because if you were to, go to some place and study for 4 years and then come out and
Mhm.
like everyone you know has died and life
Yeah.
has moved on, then like what do you do anymore?
Yeah.
I mean, that also kind of supports the tenet that I created that surrounds like there's an unwillingness. Maybe that aspect is part of it. It's like,
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Like, oh, it's been 20 years, everyone I know and love is like changed completely. Why would I bother wanting to rule? Or like now I feel unfit to rule as a result of this kind of time dilation happening.
There could
Right.
be, and I don't want to like, the only thing I would be careful is I don't want to like, I love all this, but like end up preventing the student from being able to reconnect with their people
Mhm.
purely by them having passed along. Like one way we could spin this is say the person felt 30 years of studying there and it seems like a long time and maybe like they physically didn't age. Then they come back, but they're a different person to the people they left
Mhm.
because they've lived for 30
Mhm.
years in all this knowledge.
Yeah.
If we made like 100 years past, then they'd be dead. It'd be easier for them to not be interested in the place they came from. But I think it'd be more
Right.
heartbreaking if they came back with certain knowledge and the people they knew no longer mean anything to them because they're more
Yeah.
concerned with
Yeah.
other stuff, like their girlfriend or their mother or whoever they come back
Spouse,
to.
even.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Like
Mhm.
suddenly they're not. Their interests don't matter anymore, which kind of reflects what could happen if you
Yeah.
go to college and you go back to your high school
Yeah.
friends, right? And suddenly you're out of
Mhm.
sync with them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. That's why I think that if we keep the time dilation not like static,
Minimal. Yeah.
no. So it can go in either direction.
Oh,
Then
okay.
you create a greater breadth of kind of
Options.
options in terms of stories you can tell. Absolutely, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So there is like an interesting story to be told of someone who hasn't been seen in over 200 years and then they finally emerge from the temple. And then
Mhm.
there is an equally interesting story of someone who's like, I've been gone a month, but to me it's been 100 years. And you're right, like that's where that deep disconnect happens. It's not a matter of time, but a matter of change within the person themselves. I think that having both of those as a possibility is really interesting.
Yeah, I like the blend, and it is definitely very tragic to think about. Like, you enter the school, maybe you have a girlfriend or you're engaged or something on the outside. You enter the school, and it feels like
I'll wait
ages.
for you.
Yeah, it feels like ages are passing, and you finally are like, well, shit, like I can't do this anymore. I'm gonna like start a relationship with somebody in here. You get married, then you leave the
Yeah.
school, and your ex fiance has only aged like 2 months, and they're like, "What the fuck? Like, you were just here. How did you forget
Mhm.
about me already?"
Yeah, you can like have lifetimes of experience within the stopped time or within this
Mhm.
dilated time, and
Yeah.
then come out and you're just completely warped. And I don't mean that in necessarily a bad way, but like altered, like in such a dramatic way. I think that's really fun. Yeah.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Um,
Did you do your second tenant
I
already?
did not.
Okay.
And I actually did that on purpose because mine's such a fucking curveball. We're talking about these like high stakes dramatic stuff, and my second tenet is very plainly students compete against one another to prove their academic dominance utilizing a complex series of games.
Mhm.
So effectively, what I'm trying to get at here, right, is that is how you prove your mastery in the subjects of knowledge that you're interested in, right? Is through games. And what I mean by that is, hey, we're going to test you using like, oh, do you want to know how probability works? Guess what? We're going to play a dice based game, right? Or maybe some more complex levels of knowledge requires more complex games to be played, like with the ultimate game being something that's remarkably complex beyond our normal comprehension or something like that. Because, there's an interesting kind of historical context where stories are told in game form, like ancient stories, even chess, for example, is supposed to be to teach nobles and nobility how to become a better ruler, right? Like the kind of nitty gritty stuff. And I thought that'd be a really interesting and fun way to kind of express, like how knowledge is gained and earned in this kind of fantastical school.
Yeah, I don't think that's a curveball. I think it works pretty well with what we've got going so far.
Mm.
And like also I think works with this idea that maybe this god of knowledge is bored and wants to play games with people. And
Mm.
it's been like playing these games with its professor animals this whole time, so they're now like masters of their
Mhm.
respective games and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's kind of fun, actually. Yeah.
It speaks to the teaching model of this particular entity behind it all, right? Like, I mean, that may just be their approach to how they teach people, you know?
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I mean, there's also like a potential for like a Yu-Gi-Oh-esque carnival
Yep.
of like nonsense, which I'm like thinking about. I'm like, that could be kind of fun as well. You know, like
Because you have the academic games, like that's always exciting in any
yeah,
academic
yeah,
fantasy, right?
yeah, and like
Mhm.
that's there's the Tri-Wizard tournament, and there's
Right.
like all those. It's a staple, and it's fun. But I'm also just thinking like there is historical context for this that is like very serious and dark if we really wanted to go that way. But there's also the goofball like nonsense that we can kind of amp it up with as well.
Mhm.
So yeah, all right. Exciting so far. So why don't we do our recap and figure out where we want to go, and then we'll run into the twist. So Courtney, you started us off today. What was your first tenet?
That was that the god of knowledge was imprisoned or captured or kept here in some way long, long ago. And because of that, the rest of the world is in a sort of dark age.
Yeah, I think that's definitely come into the narrative. I
Mhm.
don't think that we've seen necessarily like the kind of repercussions of that storyline yet, but I think that it's certainly prominent.
I mean, one thing that we haven't addressed, but I think is probably a consequence too of it, is that if the rest of the world's a dark age, I imagine the failed people who come back and try to like then assume control, like you probably have a lot of despots and a lot of like
Mhm.
corrupt people in charge, you know, and that's
Mhm.
why there is a need for a true leader in all these countries. Like the world must be in a really unpleasant place outside, in the sense that like they're a ignorant but also dysfunctional. So you're looking at like
Mhm.
Mhm.
lots of shitty peasant leaders, you know, potentially who
Right.
are just interested in
Yeah.
local concerns and maybe their survival as opposed to thinking about the whole of a society.
Mhm.
Daniel, Daniel, you just gave me a really interesting idea for a narrative. Do you mind if I cut in?
Sure.
Okay. Shitty despot. Yes, absolutely. You have a charlatan who says, yes, I absolutely graduated, and
Mm-hmm.
no, the fuck they didn't. But because of this, they're ruling their country.
Right.
However, by doing so, what that actually spurs is someone who did graduate and leave, but felt unwilling or unready
Mhm.
to rule.
Oh, to lead who's there. Yeah.
Mhm.
Who
Exactly.
knows the
Yeah.
truth? Because he's like, I don't know, he's
Yeah.
running like a homeless shelter. That's what he thinks that was the way to really rebuild society. That's what he's working
Right.
on, you know?
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I like
Yeah.
that because it does drive home that idea of like the unwilling are the best leaders.
Yeah.
Yes.
And he sees this injustice happening. He sees this corruption and is
Mhm.
like, man, I can't sit on the sidelines
He has
anymore.
no choice.
I need to
Exactly.
actually go for it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Forcing the good to do good,
Mhm.
through this kind of yeah, absolutely. That I think is a really cool narrative that we can kind of dig teeth into.
Mhm.
And then Daniel, this is where we can kind of satisfy both of our thoughts, right? Is that they come out unwilling and then things happen to make them willing, and you
Yes.
force
Yeah.
them to step into this position and
And you
role.
never know who the people are, right? Because they could be in your society
Exactly.
serving a role, and then they've
Mhm.
given up on they don't have the ego anymore, you know?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then something happens, they're like, I understand now that I have to do this, that I, in fact, have to step up because otherwise it means death or destruction for
Yeah.
the people I love. Absolutely.
Mhm.
There we go.
Mhm.
That's good. Okay. So Daniel, what was your first tenet? Let's go.
Now we've got this is one of forbidden knowledge that is sealed off from study, and that a country which is currently in ruins once possessed it.
Yeah, so we talked about that. I don't know if we ever fully decided on like it being ambition or progress or something along those lines.
Yeah, I'm kind of the opinion that we haven't really given that enough narrative leeway yet, Daniel.
Yeah, it's a good question as to what it is. I think it does have something to do with
Yeah.
ambition, and it has something to
Mm.
do with freedom, right? Because we rely on this one school. Like, why is it that we can't establish another school someplace to teach other things?
Right.
part of it is because the people who have the knowledge are few and far between and uninterested in teaching. But is that an illusion? Like people, I know this is magical, but is it an illusion that people can't learn things? I don't know.
So the immediate thing that comes to mind is that they can't create another school, or they're unwilling to create another school, right? Because there's also like the power involved with, maintaining a structure that relies on a very few amount of people, that relies on the people who are deemed worthy, aka the graduates and stuff like that, right? Maybe that is part of what makes them unwilling as well, is that they see that this individual school, like the power structure that exists, is designed to keep the powerful powerful and is not designed to actually genuinely help the people and society at large.
Do you mean the school in particular?
Yeah. So it's kind of like it's an imperialist attitude that this knowledge is the only knowledge that's worth knowing and the only knowledge that's worth teaching.
I don't. I wonder about the ambitions of the God of knowledge in the school itself. Like my impression is that it doesn't have much intentionality. But then what you're saying makes me think: what if that was the position of the country that was destroyed?
Oh, go on. Say more about that.
Because you're talking about like privileged canonical knowledge, right? That's the trap, is that we've given ourselves the idea of like this is the stuff we need to learn and nothing else can be taught or understood. Perhaps that was the position of that school, and they had something to do with trapping the God of knowledge in the first place to further that position. Like they had certain canonical knowledge that all other countries derived from them, and then they imprisoned the God of knowledge to make it so that no one else could learn and they could trap that knowledge for themselves.
Oh, yeah, that's really cool. And so now, like, the only way, and obviously this is not necessarily in the narrative that we're talking about, but effectively the only way that we can move the world forward is through apocrypha, is through learning and like unlearning the very system that's in place and stuff like that.
So there, when you say imperialism, the knowledge that is lost must be something like oppression or like
control.
Yeah.
Ooh,
Something like that.
Yeah. I do like that. And I mean, control works perfectly with the God of knowledge being imprisoned in this one place. If they basically like put some control on it so that it can only exist in this one small area, and then something happened to that country, maybe they just basically imploded on themselves because it was overly controlled and fascistic.
Yeah. Maybe they knew that by doing it, it would doom them all, but they did it as like a show of faith, like I believe so strongly that this is my conviction that will it destroy my country? Yes, but it will propagate a worldview to the rest of the world for generations to come. And that to them is why they decided, you know what, fuck it, it's worth it, like to propagate this idea of canonical knowledge, canonical ideas, right? And that says a lot about that forbidden knowledge as well, that people are willing to effectively destroy themselves to make sure that knowledge does not spread, cannot spread, because they deem it to be the wrong type of knowledge.
Maybe it's like a blend of control and hierarchy, what they were reigning over, because it's like this, I don't know, it feels like the world is very flat in terms of leadership outside of the school. Or like it's sort of like small sized governments like we talked about, or councils and things like that.
Right.
So there's less of this hierarchical view now, but that also leads to people not wanting to take charge because they view that as like not a good thing.
I mean, what you're saying speaks to kind of the fundamental, I guess, taxonomic nature of scientific knowledge, right? So like what does scientific knowledge do? It classifies things, right? And it looks for an objective truth, and it breaks it down into categories, and it makes hierarchies and structures, right? Like taxonomies of things. So I wonder if like this knowledge is like the science, in quotes. It's like the process of creating a rigid and perfect authoritarian society is one of the things that come out of the science. Another thing that can come out of it would be like how to control your emotions to such a degree that you have some certain power. Or, the science leads to control, I think, and leads to what they viewed as some sort of harmony. And that's what's lost. The scary thing to find is the science inside the school. I'm just giving it an
Yeah.
objective, just a random name, but it
Sure.
seems like what you guys are describing are almost the symptoms of understanding this discipline. You know what I mean? Like, if
Yeah.
I know this discipline, I have such control, and then it manifests as a sort of authoritarianism.
Yeah, I like that because it's like it makes it so like the subject itself isn't evil, but the things that can
Mhm.
stem from it are
Yes,
can be
yes.
not good.
Libertarianism, you know, things like that.
Yeah.
Ambition.
Maybe what's also happening is that the God of knowledge, besides being bound in terms of what it is literally captured in this school, maybe it can't teach those properties, or it cannot impart that knowledge as an additional binding to itself. And so,
Or doesn't want to, maybe.
yeah,
Mhm.
Because
yeah,
it led to its imprisonment, you know?
right. And then maybe there's like something that's like, okay, it has to instill these values in the hopes that the graduates will then learn the extra
Yes.
stuff on their own, right?
Uh-huh.
So
Yeah.
you can't wholly trust this system. You can't wholly trust this one gleaming edifice, right? This one
Mhm.
idol. You have to expand and grow beyond the edifice that you come from, right? There's this kind of beautiful metaphor, this beautiful theme of having to go beyond what you already know in order to become, the truly ascended philosopher king, like that you are meant to be.
Yeah, and like maybe that's also why this god uses games as tests because it's a way of thinking differently and also of putting yourself in a position where you want to win. Like
Mhm.
it's making you compete to like trigger some sort of ambition
Mm.
in you without directly teaching it.
Yeah,
Mm.
it's true.
And then, of course, there's going to be games that they play where it's like the point is not to win, like, or you're put in like a Daniel, help me out, Star Trek reference.
Mhm.
Kobayashi Maru,
Yeah,
an
it's to
unwinnable
understand that
situation. Yeah.
some situations are unwinnable, yeah. Well, it tests
Yeah.
your reaction to it rather than the situation.
Mhm.
Right. And
Yeah.
maybe that is the final kind of game that's played, is that you're cast out seemingly before you're ready to learn that knowledge, or like to accept that knowledge. And so
Mhm.
maybe not every graduate is actually a graduate. Maybe there's no such thing as a graduate to them, but in reality, those people who leave have actually been given the okay, have been given the graduation acceptance. It's just that they have to go and learn that last bit on their own or something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Now I'm picturing, since we talked about like this university as a treehouse, basically, picturing like a giant tree that has maybe like 6 branches, and the seventh has been like cut off or burned off, or is just
Mm.
no longer there.
Mhm.
Like that
Yes.
seventh branch of
Or
knowledge.
it's decaying or something, yeah.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
see. I'm thinking that it's funny you mention that, because in my brain, I'm thinking that this last branch is so high in the canopy that you cannot see it, right? Like you can maybe see all the others, but it's just hidden
Mhm.
behind branches from the other 6 kind of schools of knowledge or something like that.
I can see it's whatever the science of ambition is, or whatever it fundamentally is. I can see this being, as you guys are saying, something that's hinted at in each lesson. But I also imagine there is a creature that represents it,
Oh yeah.
Mhm.
out
Yeah.
there that you can somehow gain access to. And it makes me think that perhaps, like, prior to all this happening, you know, it's almost it's kind of like talking about the ethics of like what is the right what does intelligence and what does knowledge really mean. But
Mm.
whatever country originally was learning prior to knowledge being trapped up and inaccessible, it seems like they chose one among all bits of knowledge to be like, this is the way, right? And
Mhm.
privileged it, and that was the sin in the end. And then, but in order to privilege it, they drowned out all other knowledge by imprisoning the god.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Exactly. Oh man, we're getting into it in this one, huh? What that was your first tenet, right, Daniel?
Yes.
Okay, so my first tenet, we gotta go through this.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. Though the students have the right to rule their country, the incredibly low graduation rate and something about their schooling makes the graduates unwilling to rule. I definitely feel satisfied in the
Yeah.
conversations that we had surrounding this. This is like
Yeah.
philosophically very interesting. I'm glad that we've done that. So, Courtney, hit us with your second tenet.
Mine is that at least some of the teachers, if not all of them, are mundane animals, which I think we spoke to a bit, and I
Yeah,
think shows up in just like the imagery of the school as this giant
right.
tree with animal professors wandering around playing games with people.
Right. And
Mhm.
again, I want to emphasize that they're also sentient. So they're not
Yes.
just
Yeah.
yes. Yeah, exactly.
They're all rocket raccoons, all of them.
I mean,
Different colors.
effectively, right? Yeah.
Different
yeah.
colors.
Different flavors of Rocket Raccoon. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. And Daniel, your second tenet, sir.
The passage of time is different inside the tower than outside.
I think that we talked about that pretty at length. What about you?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's just the kind of an option to play with setting wise that I think whatever you put this into, like I think that's just something you can toy with and decide how that works time wise.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if you want to have this, like, again, if you're looking at this from a role-playing game perspective, having a party all come out and they're all like, oh, I've been in there for 20 years. I've been in there for 2, like it's interesting to see how that kind of synchronicity lines up. Cool. And for my second tenet, it was students compete against one another to prove their academic dominance utilizing a complex series of games. We can definitely get into that a little bit more, I think, but I think that I'd like to see that kind of manifest more after we roll the twist, So speaking of twists, do we have any other questions before we move on to the twist itself? Are there any burning questions that we need to answer about this world before we randomize some stuff?
One thing that we haven't touched on, the tenet that all knowledge in this world contains a different level of hazard capable of affecting the mind, and complex knowledge equals more hazardous.
And then they come back with powers too, right? Doesn't that mention?
Oh, we really
that
haven't touched the power thing at all. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's actually a good one, because realistically, the complexity one, like I kind of thought that the more complex the game, the more complex the knowledge, like there's parallels there, like, are we playing chess or checkers? Are we playing tic-tac-toe or Magic the Gathering? Like those are levels of complexity, and like you have to know several aspects of knowledge and stuff in order to grasp those aspects of the game itself.
Yeah, I'm curious though, like what the knowledge does that's hazardous to people or like affects the mind.
I mean, it could be as simple as we were establishing that you come back and you end up not interested in leading. It could be that when you possess certain knowledge, like let's say you were on the third floor of I don't know, genius creativity, right? And so you are taught all these creative disciplines and the value of making art, blah blah blah, and now suddenly you have the power to make sculptures from your mind or something crazy. But how it affects your mind is that you're so obsessed with the art of creation that this is the danger that this knowledge poses. You now only do that, like you're not interested in anything else besides making sculptures, and you go back home and you become the crazy lady that has a sculpture garden, and that's all she does all day is make these weird ass sculptures, and they're really intricate. That's how it poisons your mind.
Yeah, I do like that. It's like if you become too focused on one type of knowledge, you become imbalanced in yourself and you lose track of everything else, which speaks to what happened with that country too, and its control / ambition hierarchy.
Obsessed with that aspect of knowledge. And you're absolutely right, Courtney. There's parallels there. Like, are these people, like, maybe they're the ones who got infected with this idea of like hierarchy. And so they had to instill hierarchy everywhere. And that kind of ended up backfiring on the whole ass world, Cool. And for the powers, did we want to talk about the powers at all?
Or like Daniel, I think you were speaking to like a creativity thing could show up as you can make stuff from your mind directly. Like you don't even need to necessarily wield media or wield like instruments. You can just kind of like make shit happen.
Yeah, I think something like it doesn't have to be that, but like I think perhaps it manifests as having such a genius ability in whatever it is you studied or you specialized in, that is on borderline supernatural. Because it depends on if we want this world to be high fantasy or low fantasy, or perhaps it doesn't have magic at all. Whatever it is, I think I'm leaning towards less fantastical powers and more they are borderline divine in the kind of skill they've obtained.
I'm with you 100%, Daniel. I think it's way more interesting to see like your powers of perception are so great that you effectively have telepathy, or you can effectively see like what people are going to do or say like before they do it, stuff like that. And that's just like, it has nothing to do with actually reading their mind, but like reading body language to such a precise degree that you can move out of the way, or you can effectively read the mind of that person,
Right.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm down with that. So savant levels of, intelligence in certain aspects.
Mhm.
Cool. All right. So yeah, let's go ahead and roll for the twist. Our twist this time is oh, that's an interesting one. We've got blood for the blood god.
I was trying to make this setting nice and cute with animals, and now we've got blood.
Okay. Well, I mean, okay, hold on. It doesn't necessarily mean that there has to be blood sacrifice. That's a different one. That's a different twist.
Mhm,
Blood
mhm.
for the blood god doesn't necessarily mean that violence has to be the answer. Daniel is smart enough that he can be like, well, thematically, blood actually means this, right? So, like, maybe we can take the essence of blood and kind of do a different interpretation, or maybe just make it so those games that they're playing have higher stakes in some cases, like
Mhm.
there's the joke in Yu-Gi-Oh very often that, like, why are you playing above like a pit of spikes and razor blades in a children's card game? It's like, well, we could throw something like that to it as well, where the games they play are very serious and the stakes are very high or something like that.
I mean, blood could be seen as just like life force itself. So it could be something where, I don't know, losing games like transfers your life to the tree, to the god, to the animals,
Mm,
like something like that.
And if we want to do the analysis on it, like you're saying, blood signifies life. It signifies essence. It signifies the fuel in the body to do things in some
mm,
ways, the lubrication of our functioning. But then I think the other question is, what's the subject of the blood god? Like,
Mhm.
who is the blood god? Obviously, the first suggestion
mm.
is it's the god of knowledge. It doesn't have to be.
Right.
And there's a sense of appeasement
Yeah.
in that phrase, right? Blood for the blood god at least says to me, like, I need to give something valuable of myself to something else in order to have a blessing
Mhm.
or appeasement. And it's ravenous because the blood
Right.
god suggests something that is hungry, right? So it could,
Yeah.
you could,
Mhm.
the subject isn't the knowledge god. Perhaps there is some other third party, that is a villainous on the scene that has something to do with the forgotten city, or with the
Yeah.
forbidden knowledge, that needs to be appeased.
Yeah, like the concentration of that control hierarchy stuff was so strong in that destroyed
Mm.
country that it actually created a pseudo god
Oh,
thing
demigod,
that,
right.
yeah, basically like a demigod that maybe it demands control, and it demands like ambition from people,
Mm.
and in order to get that, like if you have that inkling of wanting power, you have to go to it and like sacrifice something of yourself, whether it's like you can have, X number of years off of my life if I'm able to gain control over people.
Okay, there's a lot going on here, and I'm a big fan of it, right? I like the idea that there's a duality that we're dealing with here, and this demigod is part of that duality. If there is a dark age, perhaps it is the reason behind this dark age in some way. And it is the reason that the world has been stunted and stagnant for as long as it has been. There's so much that we can do there. And I mean, we've only talked about the god of knowledge. We don't know what other gods exist out there. This could be the
Mhm.
manifestation of its twin, right? The thing that's necessary. The other thing that you said that I'm really interested in, Courtney, and excuse me for just babbling here, but um the other thing that you're suggesting is this idea that you have to pay some price to this blood god in order for you to rule or something like that. And maybe that's the other aspect that kind of manifests when it comes to finding worthy rulers in some ways. Like maybe as Daniel suggested, the world is ruled by despots strictly because the people who are willing to shorten their lives for a little bit of power, they're the ones who aren't the enlightened folks.
I'm reluctant to add another. I mean, I agree with everything, but I'm reluctant to add another being that's counterpart to the knowledge god because I think it diminishes the knowledge god's mystery. But that doesn't mean people don't view this other thing potentially in that sort of way. And I wonder
Right.
if we can make
Mhm.
this kind of circular. If perhaps this is a student who has bad ideas, a graduate who
Oh,
has recovered the forbidden knowledge and is back out in the world,
okay.
and has connections to the old city.
Did the student literally eat the apple of
Mhm.
knowledge from the tree
They
and
got it. Now they have their own
gained
cults.
that?
Well,
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
what if, okay, so
Oh,
Daniel,
and they're
yes.
teaching. That's the forbidden knowledge. to being able to teach
Oh,
others.
Oh, instruction.
yeah.
Yeah.
Which is control. It can be used as control.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
if you teach
Yeah.
someone something and you manipulate them into believing what you believe, and you don't let them figure out things for themselves, you've eventually created a convert to your cult. So this
Yeah.
Right.
graduate
I love
has the
it.
knowledge and is making a cult of his own, a knowledge school of his own.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to add my layer to it. So when you said that this other, the seventh layer was destroyed and forgotten, there is one survivor, and it is this demigod. It is the one who ate the forbidden knowledge fruit and has created this offshoot kind of cult that's existed. That's why it has demigod status.
But can they be a student though? Like, I don't want them to be a god. It would be really great if they were someone from some country that studied and learned the secret. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, that's
Yeah.
exactly what I'm suggesting here.
Like they like went further up the tree, found the sort of maybe
Yeah.
rotting branch or something, broke a piece off for themselves without the knowledge of anybody else, and then graduated.
Yeah.
Well, what I'm suggesting is that this student, and when I say demigod, I don't mean that it has literal divine powers. I want to make sure that that's clear, right? But it does have something that is akin to that, which is this kind of apocryphal or cultish like knowledge, the ability to teach, right?
Right. Right.
And what I'm really interested in is this idea that this student is the survivor of the previous country that was wiped out, and it now bears the sins of its fathers, the sins of its creators on its body in some way. And so it takes on the appearance of something that is divine, but in reality, it is something that is just kind of it's a direct disciple of the God of knowledge. It's just stolen power. It is stolen divinity. It is stolen knowledge, but it comes from that country that originally imprisoned the god.
So you're saying this person originally came from the fallen city.
Exactly. Right. And we can play with like the mythology of what happened to suggest that it's kind of sin, it's kind of taking this rotten branch or taking this fruit is what cursed the city to begin with, and what caused its complete downfall.
You could split the difference here by saying perhaps, because I almost don't want the teacher to be from the Forbidden City. I want them to end up there. So I'm wondering if perhaps the student came from somewhere else, but met a fragment of perhaps a student or something left over that had learned the knowledge but never escaped the school.
Mm-hmm.
And they carry with them that person who is from the original city. Almost like finding a piece of Voldemort, right? And then like now you carry him and he's teaching you, oh, I can tell you the secret. You need to go back to my city. And then he helps influence the creation of this cult. Because if the teacher's actually from a different city, then the other cities will actually recognize him and be like, holy crap, it's so-and-so. We thought you were lost to the tree of knowledge, that kind of thing.
I'm now picturing Ratatouille, except the rat is
yes,
is an evil authoritarian.
Oh my god! Yeah,
I mean, I'm also thinking that, you know, like we had these things that like affect the mind, right? Like these games that are played. That's what I'm seeing here, is that this is just someone whose mind has been so warped by the tree that when this student comes upon them, they're like, I recognize that you're valuable and I'm going to take you back.
Yeah.
But this other person has like very little agency in terms of what they can actually do.
They're beholden to it too.
Exactly. Right? Exactly.
And it's almost like they would see it as a god in a sense, as this other god in the tree, when really it's probably someone who, a student from a long time ago who got stuck, couldn't pass, but has the knowledge and needs a way out.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's absolutely what I had in mind as well.
Yeah,
and that's what I mean by demigod. Where
now
they are, yeah, exactly.
They're literally carrying this like elevated student in them or with them or something freaky. I don't know.
Right.
Maybe it's this, you don't want to make it a snake like Voldemort, but it could be some other animal form that comes with it.
Yeah.
Like wait. Yeah, Ratatouille right there.
Make them animalistic in some way. Yeah, sure.
Or they have an animal, perhaps,
Yeah, because they've spent like so long in the tree. Maybe they've sort of evolved over time to take on these animal properties.
But does it grow out of them? Maybe they have another head that's like an animal head, that you don't see. Because I could see, okay, so hear me out. I could see like
Yeah, I'm like,
hear me out. I'm
hearing. I'm
hear me
here
out.
to listen.
So the student returning has been in the tree for so long, they've been merged with this other student who is like a demigod to them. They don't know who this is, but they're following their evil strictures from the old city. This person has returned to the old city, found the old artifacts, whatever, and now he's seeking out to teach people. So like he goes back to his country, and his friend Robert recognizes him. He's like, "Oh my gosh, I thought you were gone in the city forever. We thought you were lost." But obviously, he has to look like a normal person for Robert to not freak out. But he doesn't realize, he convinces Robert, "Oh, I have all this knowledge. We can save the city, blah, blah, blah. You have to come with me back to the Forbidden City," or whatever. They go there. And then when he kind of like gives him the knowledge and inducts him into the cult, that's when you see the other head emerge, or the other part of him. That's the
So
animal.
it's like Quado. It's
kind of, yeah. Like it reveals
like
itself
from Total
yeah.
Recall.
And then you're like, oh, but it's too late at this point because you're too far down the cult. Like you're in it.
I see. I'm open to the idea that like there is something that requires some secret knowledge, and then you're you're shown some kind of
something horrible.
Thing that you shouldn't. Yeah, exactly. I'm totally okay with that idea for sure.
Like I don't care what it is, but I'm thinking like just don't turn them into like a Godzilla right off the bat. They become
no. See, I'm thinking of just like it's not like a head, but like maybe there's like an eye or an extra mouth or something like that. Like something that is like not entirely fully fleshed out.
Yeah, I guess speaking of flesh, I had been picturing like this student becoming tree-like, like maybe part of the transfer of knowledge from this student who's been trapped there, who they see as a godlike figure, is basically like piercing themselves with part of the tree that this perpetual student is like wedged into or something, and like that splinter grows in their body. It becomes more bark-like, so they become more godlike in appearance because of that, because of the association of the god of knowledge with the tree and so on.
So they're effectively kind of like a dryad almost, right?
Yeah, basically.
Yeah. And then, that's kind of interesting as well, because I imagine that, like this person who sees this demigod, they see it and they see that they're like stuck to the tree. They're like rooted to the tree. And they're like, I'm going to hack you up and bring you back.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's their way of wielding that kind of forbidden knowledge and power, is that they literally absconded with part of the tree itself. Oh, wait. And that would also build for the blood god thing, because it would also imply that students give their life and body to be absorbed into the tree of knowledge as well.
It makes me think of Stranger Things. Remember, Vecna is kind of like merged with creepy Skin World in the last season.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm picturing that, but like less horrifying, more like a tree kind of merging with the person, and then
right
kneeling before this thing in the hidden level, and then like it's saying to you, like, I can teach you so much more, and then you carry it along within you. So like I can see like perhaps, when he's talking to Robert in the cult, he like opens up his chest and it's like bark and trees, and inside there's like the knowledge,
exactly. Yeah.
Like this thing is always seen as seated, right? Or like with giant robes draping over its legs and stuff like that. And then it, like with a hooded cloak. And then eventually when you actually see it, you see that it's like nothing but tree from like the waist down or something like that. Yeah, that works for me 100%. I love a lot of what we're going on here. I think it's time to move on to the main storyline quest so we can wrap it up. How do y'all feel about that?
Yep.
All right. Whew. So, do we want to roll for the theme and then the thing that we're focusing on for this main storyline quest, or do we have an idea of what we want to do?
It would make sense for it to be like something about finding the truth about this cult that's popped up in this ruined country. Like maybe if it's an RPG, or like a party of adventurers who gets wind of this, and things gradually lead you towards that ruined land and what's now starting to grow within it.
Yeah, there's definitely like two like big ways that I can see us taking this. If we're doing this like an RPG, there is, are you in or outside of the tree? Are you in or outside of the school? If you're in the school, then you have like a fun little school adventure where there's battle games involved and stuff like that. If you're outside of the school, then yeah, you have the cultist angle. You have like, okay, how are we dealing with like the power dynamics and the political side of things? You have two completely different games here, which I think is really interesting.
I mean, perhaps the way to bridge the distance is make the school be physically located within the ruined country. And so the school grounds and the tree is are nice and verdant, but you're told not to wander outside of it because that's technically the domain of the country. That way you can have the party be adventurers who are going to the school, like their kids chosen to lead or something. And they start learning about the cult because the cult members operate among those students that are studying, that then lead them to adventures in the surrounding lands, during their off season or whatever, you know what I mean? Like before the games. And so they might encounter the crypts and where the teacher actually teaches. And one of the students in their group is seduced by it. And then like, why is Mary acting so weird? And why is she dressing so goth? It's because she's going to these secret meetings, that kind of thing.
So okay. One question that I have, and one thing that I can't help but think of is how far out does this time dilation bubble kind of work? Because if you're in the tree in the school and you pop out to the surrounding countryside to like deal with this cult problem, and then you come back in and you come back out, how much time has passed? Like, oh, all of a sudden the cult is way more powerful, or, like there's been 20 years where this cult has gone unfettered.
Maybe it's the domain of the whole country, where those effects take place as you travel.
Right. That's why I want to clarify with, because man, timeline shit gets really complicated if we started adding in time dilation.
Well, it also depends on how you want to play with that tenet. Like I could see that tenet being interpreted as like, when you study in there, you lose track of time. And so time passes differently in the sense that like, oh, I thought I was studying for several hours, but it was like 3 days. So like 3 days have passed in real time. It's just that you feel like you've only been studying for an hour. That could be an explanation for it. Depends on how they want to play it,
Gotcha. Okay. Fun. I like it. So I think that what we're seeing here is that the cult is going to be kind of the thing that we're focusing on. That is going to be the antagonist of our main storyline quest here, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that makes the most sense. And that, makes a faction for us too.
I agree. Here's where I want to complicate things slightly. We cannot just defeat this cult in combat. We can't just beat up the old tree man. We have to defeat them in a battle game. That's what I'm going to toss out there because I think that's fun as fuck, personally.
Maybe it's a game that the cult leader created themselves.
Yeah.
Ooh. Or like maybe that's the thing that they went mad kind of mastering or something like that. Yeah, thematically, that makes a lot of sense and is really cool because this tree thing has been doing nothing but studying this game. That's how it went mad. And so in the beginning of this game, it is showing its dominance. It is outplaying the protagonists remarkably well. But, like it lost its mind because it couldn't truly master this thing, right? That's kind of the complexity, the knowledge that we talked about previously, right? And then the reversal at the end is the protagonist learning that kind of lost bit, that last piece that the demigod never learned or something like that.
Maybe what you can do is make it one step removed. So it's like they're competing against the other students who are potentially cult members. So it's like they're the ones who are using that knowledge that they shouldn't be using. You see what I mean? Because I don't think we want to have the teacher directly involved with them. He's out somewhere in the crypt teaching these students, right?
Yes, I like that. Plus, I mean, I've been taught by the person who made the game is kind of like
right.
Advantage.
And they don't want to reveal that knowledge. Like they probably are pretending to be in some other classes or whatever.
Sure.
But they're relying on it to cheat, basically.
I was going to say, I'm like, and also like cheating's got to be involved here,
of
right?
Course.
Like we got to have some level of cheating going on. Yeah.
I mean, you end up with the Skullman's situation. Like the Skullman's, from what I recall, is like a secret cadre of students trained by Satan who always ends up taking one of the students, like the brightest one. So it's like you can that kind of setup is sort of what we're dealing with here. We've got students seduced by the secret knowledge to serve some purpose.
Yeah,
that's fun. So I feel like we're missing a layer. I feel like we went from start to end, but there's nothing in the middle that's really kind of connecting everything together. Does that make sense? What is stake? Maybe we need to add some stakes here. So what's at stake that we can make this particular story even more interesting and fun?
I mean, I think the biggest stake is this cult gaining more power and trying to like take over the world and oppress people and stuff.
Right. How's that manifest though? There's got to be some kind of like reification of that concept.
maybe it's that particular tree spreading, or like the saplings from that cult leader starting to grow and take root in places.
And it seems undergirding it is the notion of the knowledge getting out, right? Because talk about growth and spreading.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm wondering if, like, ultimately, if you have the right student graduate, they're going to go out into the world with the knowledge of the teacher, right?
Sure.
That could then lead to being the leader. That could then lead to taking over the world and potentially restoring their old country. So, like, to get to where Courtney's saying, I could see it being, it's as simple as getting the right student to graduate.
Right. Oh, and then and then the students have to make sure that they don't graduate or something like that,
or that they rank better than them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, because it's all about hierarchy.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay, and then I just realized the cult. When you said like germinating or seedlings or whatever, Courtney, I'm like, oh, that's how the cult kind of self-identifies, is that they will literally plant seeds or like tree parts amongst the cultists and stuff like that. But again, it's all hidden, so it's not like it's super obvious right away.
Yeah.
Okay. Woo! All right. Yeah. That was a really fun one. Thanks again to our new listener, Overlord Zero. Maybe not new listener, but new submitter for sure. So again, big thank you for that submission. We hope you liked it. Remember that if you want us to build your world, if you want us to have fun with your concept, you can always go to our website, worldbuildwithus.com, where you can click the link, follow the instructions, and within a reasonable amount of time, we can be building your world. If you don't want to listen to us on any kind of like phone app, you can just go to YouTube, where we've got a brand new YouTube channel where you can do all the YouTube stuff like subscribing and linking and commenting, all that good stuff, and help us out with the algorithms. If you don't want to do that, you want to go to our Twitter and follow us on social media. We're over at Let's World Build. Or you can come join our Discord and chat with us more directly, with a link for that in the description. Of course, if you're feeling particularly generous, you can always go to our Patreon and, we'll give you 2 episodes instead of 1 for your prompts. We also have patron-only episodes called the Aphid Lounge. You also get patron-only Discord privileges and just, a bunch of other goodies here and there as well. And so with all of that, that's going to do it for this episode of World Build with Us. Remember that we love you very much. We're going to get through this together. Until next week.